Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It is time for Frankenstein Tea, daily short story program brought to you by the Island Free Library. Short story program for adult listeners. This is adult programming with adult language, adult themes, adult topics. These stories are for adults. It is with me, Kristen. I'm the director of the Island Free Library. We are located on Block Island off the coast of Rhode Island. And we had snow just a bit ago, and it seems like it's turning to rain, but I'm not really sure how that happens when the temperature doesn't go above 29 or 28 or whatever it is out there. I don't understand how it gets to be rainy sleet, but I'm the local librarian, not the weatherman, weather person, weather forecaster, whatever that is called now, without using M-A-N in it. There's my dad. Hi, Dad. I thought Judy was going to be on here. Oh, maybe that's Jude. How are you, Dad? You having snow? Did you just hear me say we had snow, but it's already kind of sleety, snizzle, snicking. That's what I said today when I couldn't. No snow, Dad. When I couldn't get my words out of my mouth. And I was talking to someone and I said, I wanted to say, yeah, it's snowing. It's already starting to stick. And I said, yeah, it's snicking. So it's snicking. It's snicked. It snicked here today. But I don't know what it's doing now. I thought I was sending home staff. I thought we were closing the building because it seemed to be getting bad. But I'm not really sure that it is. So I'm going to read a story and then make that decision. But for now, here I am with you. I hope everyone out there is well. I know vaccines are coming to places. I know my family is getting vaccines, and people on Block Island are getting vaccines this weekend. Judy on our staff is getting one. Other people we know are getting vaccines. But, I want to make sure everybody knows because that messaging came across in the State Library channel loud and clear last night through an email. Still wear your mask. Still be extra careful. There are variants out there. I don't want to be like, the negative Nelly over here because I'm really not that kind of person. But I do think it's important that we remain vigilant and safe until we're really through this. So I'm happy for everyone who's getting a vaccine, but do remember not everyone is. So keep yourself safe and wear your mask. What are the W's? I hear people call them the W's now. We probably have been calling them W's the whole time, but so wear a mask, watch your distance, wash your hands. There they are. Wear a mask, watch your distance, wash your hands. And I like to add into that, eat your vegetables, sleep well, call someone you love, think kind thoughts about yourself and others. All those things. Okay, so today is Audre Lorde's 87th birthday. She is passed away, but it would be her 87th birthday. And so in celebration of Audre Lorde, I'm going to read an Audre Lorde selection today. She is also our poet of the day on our Facebook page for our Black History Month celebration, our daily celebration of Black poets, Black American poets. And we are also celebrating Black History Month on this channel with this program, Frankenstein Tea. So I read from this book. I love this book. I love Audre Lorde. You've heard me read Audre Lorde before on this channel. But I couldn't resist celebrating her today on what would have been her 87th birthday. So, and I'm going to read one. Last week I read, Is Your Hair Still Political? That was when she couldn't get into the country because what did it say? She was growing out her locks. I meant to look that up, but it felt to me like that was dreadlocks, but maybe they weren't called locks because that would have made more sense if they were called dreadlocks. Let me see if I can just find that story. Oh, is your hair still political? Yeah, locks. Yeah, so I guess it was dreadlocks. She was wearing her hair natural. I touched my natural locks, of which I was so proud. A year ago, I had decided to stop cutting my hair and grow locks as a personal style statement. much the same as I had worn a natural afro for most of my adult life. So I read that story last week, and she can't get into where's she going? Maybe St. Croix. No, maybe she lives on St. Croix. I read that today. She's going to another island, and she can't get in because of her hair. They do let her in, but she has to put up a fight. And then she writes about how, that very, my language, dangerous territory of, because it was a Black immigration officer not letting her in. So it was a Black woman not letting another Black woman, and sort of by white standards, denying her something. That's a great story. That one last week was called, Is Your Hair Still Political? And that was an essay from this book, but I also believe that's a poem that she wrote. So worth listening to. And it's this cover on the YouTube channel if you want to look for it. This is the cover that I read from last week. And I've read other Audre Lorde, and you can find those. This book is called The Selected Works of Audre Lorde, edited and with an introduction by Roxane Gay, published by W.W. Norton and Company, 2020. And today, by Audre Lorde, I am reading 4th of July. The first time I went to Washington, D.C. was on the edge of the summer when I was supposed to stop being a child. At least that's what they said to us all at graduation from the 8th grade. My sister Phyllis graduated at the same time from high school. I don't know what she was supposed to stop being. But as graduation presents for us both, the whole family took a 4th of July trip to Washington, D.C., the fabled and famous capital of our country. It was the first time I'd ever been on a railroad train during the day. When I was little, we used to go to the Connecticut shore. We always went at night on the milk train because it was cheaper. Preparations were in the air around our house before school was even over. We packed for a week. There were 2 very large suitcases that my father carried and a box filled with food. In fact, my first trip to Washington was a mobile feast. I started eating as soon as we were comfortably ensconced in our seats and did not stop until somewhere after Philadelphia. I remember it was Philadelphia because I was disappointed not to have passed by the Liberty Bell. My mother had roasted 2 chickens and cut them into dainty bite-sized pieces. She packed slices of brown bread and butter and green pepper and carrot sticks. There were little violently yellow iced cakes with scalloped edges called marigolds that came from Cushman's Bakery. There was a spice bun and rock cakes from Newton's, the West Indian bakery across Lenox Avenue from St. Mark's School, an iced tea and a wrapped mayonnaise jar. There were sweet pickles for us and dill pickles for my father, and peaches with the fuzz still on them, individually wrapped to keep them from bruising. And for neatness, there were piles of napkins and a little tin box with a washcloth dampened with rose water and glycerin for wiping sticky mouths. I wanted to eat in the dining car because I had read all about them, but my mother reminded me for the umpteenth time that dining car food always cost too much money, and besides, you never could tell whose hands had been playing all over that food, nor where those hands had been just before. My mother never mentioned that Black people were not allowed into railroad dining cars headed south in 1947. As usual, whatever my mother did not like and could not change, she ignored. Perhaps it would go away, deprived of her attention. I learned later that Phyllis's high school senior class trip had been to Washington, but the nuns had given her back her deposit in private, explaining to her that the class, all of whom were white except Phyllis, would be staying in a hotel where Phyllis would not be happy. Meaning, Daddy explained to her, also in private, that they did not rent rooms to Negroes. "We will take among you to Washington ourselves," my father had avowed, "and not just for an overnight in some measly fleabag hotel." American racism was a new and crushing reality that my parents had to deal with every day of their lives once they came to this country. They handled it as a private woe. My mother and father believed that they could best protect their children from the realities of race in America and the fact of American racism by never giving them name, much less discussing their nature. We were told we must never trust white people, but why was never explained, nor the nature of their ill will. Like so many other vital pieces of information in my childhood, I was supposed to know without being told. It always seemed like a very strange injunction coming from my mother, who looked so much like one of those people who were never supposed to trust, who we were never supposed to trust. But something always warned me not to ask my mother why she wasn't white and why Auntie Lila and Auntie Etta weren't, even though they were all that same problematic color, so different from my father and me, even from my sisters, who were somewhere in between. In Washington, D.C., we had one large room with 2 double beds and an extra cot for me. It was a backstreet hotel that belonged to a friend of my father's who was in real estate, and I spent the whole next day after Mass squinting up at the Lincoln Memorial, where Marian Anderson had sung after the DAR refused to allow her to sing in their auditorium because she was Black. Or because she was colored, my father said as he told us the story, except that what he probably said was Negro, because for his times, my father was quite progressive. I was squinting because I was in that silent agony that characterized all of my childhood summers, from the time school let out in June to the end of July, brought about by my dilated and vulnerable eyes exposed to the summer brightness. I viewed Julys through an agonizing corolla of dazzling whiteness, and I always hated the 4th of July, even before I came to realize the travesty such a celebration was for Black people in this country. My parents did not approve of sunglasses, nor of their expense. I spent the afternoon squinting up at monuments to freedom and past presidencies and democracy, and wondering why the light and heat were both so much stronger in Washington, D.C. than back home in New York City. Even the pavement on the streets was a shade lighter in color than back home. Late that Washington afternoon, my family and I walked back down Pennsylvania Avenue. We were a proper caravan, Mother Bright and Father Brown, the 3 of us girls, step standards in between. Moved by our historical surroundings and the heat of the early evening, my father decreed yet another treat. He had a great sense of history, a flair for the quietly dramatic, and the sense of specialness of an occasion and a trip. "Shall we stop and have a little something to cool off, Lynn?" 2 blocks away from our hotel, the family stopped for a dish of vanilla ice cream at a Breyer's ice cream and soda fountain. Indoors, the soda fountain was dim and fan-cooled, deliciously relieving to my scorched eyes. Corded and crisp and pinafored, the 5 of us seated ourselves one by one at the counter. There was I between my mother and father, and my 2 sisters on the other side of my mother. We settled ourselves along the white mottled marble counter, and when the waitress spoke at first, no one understood what she was saying, and so the 5 of us just sat there. The waitress moved along the line of us closer to my father and spoke again. "I said, I can give you to take out, but you can't eat here. Sorry." Then she dropped her eyes, looking very embarrassed, and suddenly we heard what it was she was saying, all at the same time, loud and clear. Straight backed and indignant, one by one, my family and I got down from the counter stools and turned around and marched out of the store, quiet and outraged, as if we had never been Black before. No one would answer my emphatic questions with anything other than a guilty silence. But we hadn't done anything. This wasn't right or fair. Hadn't I written poems about Bataan and freedom and democracy for all? My parents wouldn't speak of this injustice, not because they had contributed to it, but because they felt they should have anticipated it and avoided it. This made me even angrier. My fury was not going to be acknowledged by a like fury. Even my two sisters copied my parents' pretense that nothing unusual and anti-American had occurred. I was left to write my angry letter to the President of the United States all by myself, although my father did promise I could type it out on the office typewriter next week after I showed it to him in my copybook diary. The waitress was white, and the counter was white, and the ice cream I never ate in Washington, D.C. that summer I left childhood was white. And the white heat and the white pavement and the white stone monuments of my first Washington summer made me sick to my stomach for the whole rest of that trip. And it wasn't much of a graduation present after all. Autobiographical essay from the selected works of Audre Lorde. I read just a bit about her today, and so a lot of that clicked for me. I had read that story last week, and then I had decided to read the political hair story instead. And so today, when it was her birthday, and I read a little bit about her, I read about her legal blindness, her thick glasses, her parents coming from Carriacou in the West Indies, her Audrey and two sisters and her mom and dad living in Harlem, and her mother, the family often talked about how she could pass for Puerto Rican. And so those were just some pieces that I read about her online in a bio. And yet all of those pieces were in that story today. And I hadn't picked up on all of them last week when I read it to myself. But today, either the second reading or the reading out loud or the little bit of research I did prior really pieced them together nicely for me in that story. So maybe you want to Google her and listen again. I think that would be worth it. Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for listening. Have a great afternoon. Stay safe, whether you're driving or needing to wear a mask. Be safe out there, and we'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of Frankenstein Tea. Peace. Bye, Dad.